aerospace engineer. That's what my degree's in. I have a bachelor's and a master's in aerospace engineering. And so I work at one of the NASA centers. So there's 10 NASA centers around the United States. And so the one that I work at is called the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And so they're based in around LA in California. And this NASA center is primarily in charge of all the robotics missions. So all of the manned missions, such as the moon, happens at like other NASA centers. We're in charge of all of the robotic spacecraft, the ones that don't have any people on board. So my job specifically, I do what's called attitude control, which is a funny name, but when we say that, we mean like orientation control. So I do the guidance and the control, meaning that I'm in charge of the orientation of the spacecraft. So so I work on one spacecraft in particular that's at Saturn right now. It's called Cassini, and it's been there for about 10 years. So my job is to point the cameras and all of the other science instruments to make sure that they are looking at the right place when they want to take a picture or something like that. I think for me it was a very interesting transition going from an all-girls environment to an environment that was primarily male-dominated. So at Mercy, there's no guys around, so you're not afraid to, if you know the answer to a question, then you'll answer it. But I think I've heard about a lot of friends being in high school and not wanting to be smarter than the boys because they think that the boys will find that attractive or something like that. So when I first, I did pretty well at Mercy, and I liked school, so I liked answering questions. So my hands were usually raised. And when I got to college, and I remember very specifically in the very first lecture that I ever was in, there were maybe 100 students sitting in the classroom, and of those 100 students, there were 5 girls. And I remember sitting there, and a teacher asked a question, and I knew the answer, and I did not raise my hand because I was very intimidated. So it actually, and after several weeks, I got my confidence back. It was just a moment of, kind of, being surprised that I didn't quite know how to handle it. And then I sort of was able to say, wait a minute, this is no different than being in classroom with little girls. And then I had no problem raising my hand. Now, many of the other girls that I was friends with never raised their hands for lectures. So I do think that Mercy, that having a basis for an environment where I had no problems answering questions and doing well in school, I think that helped a lot. Definitely in college and probably beyond, giving me confidence in my abilities as a person, not just as a male or female. I would like to say to all the Mercy women listening now that if you like science or math or engineering or technology, then don't be afraid to go into it. If you like it, then go for it. And if you like anything else, either, it doesn't have to be any of the STEM fields. Don't be afraid to go for it. There's challenges for women in any field, but if you really want it, then go for it, and it'll be worth it.
When I did some study abroad in college, or Providence College, on a trip called Semester empty, and during that experience, I went around the world into about 14 different countries and was able to travel in each of those countries while I was there. When I was in India, I went to an orphanage, actually Mother Teresa's orphanage in Chennai, India, and I had this experience where where you just tried to tour the orphanage and meet the children, try to play with them and see, what a great job the orphanage is doing. And I happened to meet this little boy who was probably no more than 2 years old, who had the most severe cleft palate that I'd ever seen. It was so kind of like knurled flesh that you could see through because of where the upper teeth should have been, and you could see all the way to the back of the throat, even up to the nose, so it was all kind of entangled. And I'd never seen anything like that before. And even, at this point, I'd already gone into medical school the following year, and you just don't see, defects like that in America. So this kind of touched me at the time, and I kept thinking, I went home and I eventually did some reading on cleft palate, and was really fascinated by the defect and what impact it has on people's lives and their ability to eat and their ability to talk and even, fit into society as human beings. And I kind of always had an interest in this. So when I ended up going the medicine route and, learning during my medical school years that I love surgery, it was just kind of automatic that I was attracted to reconstructive and plastic surgery because they're the kind of doctors who can do this reconstruction for the kids. So I spent a lot of time over the last 5 years working with the plastic surgeons in my residency program and really loved the way that they're able to take people who have had either cancer surgery or horrible burns or horrible traumas and configure them, or even birth defects, and to rearrange the tissue so that they can, feel comfortable in their own skin again. And thought that really gave people a new lease on life. And so I've been kind of working towards going into eventually a career in plastic and reconstructive surgery and a master's in the fellowship up in the Boston area next year. So as I was doing all this training, I found out about this opportunity to go to Ecuador with a group of plastic surgeons out of the combination of Massachusetts and Connecticut areas. And so the first week of February, I went with 30 other people and spent 9 days in La Tenuga, Ecuador, which is a mountain village south of the capital, Quito, and spent all of this time meeting patients in a preoperative clinic, evaluating them to see if they were suitable for, or if they needed to have a surgery for their defects. And then we had 5 operative days where we did a total of 119 cases and operated on 119 individual people to help them with whatever problems they came to us with. So at this time I was able to see and do many of these cleft palate repairs, a lot of ear reconstruction, a lot of revision of scars from burn injuries that were made when little children were tending to the fires in their homes, and just numerous other issues that people had that we could help them with. No matter where you are, whether you're number 1 in the class or the very end, the very last in the class, whether or not you know that you want to be a brain surgeon when you grow up, or a rocket scientist, or if you have no idea what you want to do, whether or not you have any clue where in the world you want to go to college, if you've never been out of the state or out of the country, or if you've traveled around the world, I think that what you need to know is that coming from Mercy High School, where you have incredible teachers, resources who want you to become the best, most educated, most compassionate, and most really well-rounded woman that you can be, you have all the tools to do absolutely anything that your dreams become. So even if you don't know what those are at this point, you have absolutely all the tools to do that.
A little bit about Why She Plays. Why She Plays is a comprehensive look at women's basketball from little kids all the way up through Olympians and professional basketball players. I played basketball at Mercy High School, and I went on to play at a Division III school, Mount St. Mary College in New York. When I graduated college, I had the opportunity to play professionally in Israel. And at the time, I turned it down because I just wasn't sure that was something I wanted to continue doing. I was really concerned that I needed to work on a career and get a job and do all that real life stuff. And so many years later, when I was working professionally in a college, I realized that I missed the game a lot. a lot more than I had let myself sort of realize. And so I wrote a book. I always wanted to write a book, and I wanted to get back to the game of basketball. And so I basically inserted myself as a working sports writer for the WNBA for a season and wrote a book about that experience, wrote a book about the interviews that I was able to get as a result of following WNBA players and coaches around. And it was really my opportunity to give something back to the game that had provided me so much. So the book that came out in 2008, and it's still being used. It's actually being used pretty frequently in college classrooms to help teach sports journalism and women's sports studies. So I'm really excited about that, and the fact that it still has a life of its own is pretty exciting to me. Walk for Good is a nonprofit organization that I launched in 2011, and its mission is to empower and inspire acts of kindness. I created Walk for Good because I overslept by about 15 minutes on September 11th. And I should have been at the base of the World Trade Center at the time that everything happened, and I wasn't. And for a long time, I felt like I needed to justify that gift in some way. And it took me years, obviously, 10 years, to figure out what to do and how to do it. And the idea for the organization, I know to some people, doesn't really think I'm talking about hiking or walking, and I'm talking about kindness and putting those two things together. But for me, they came together because on the 10th anniversary of 9/11, I went hiking with one of my dogs, and I was out in the woods, and I was not watching television, and I wasn't watching anything that was going on, and I was just thinking, it's really just about reminding people and teaching people to be kind. Our organization allows kids to make a pledge, a free pledge for kindness. So what happens is someone can go to our website and they can pledge an act of kindness and say, I'm going to help my mom take out the garbage, or I'm going to help a friend with her homework. And in return for that act of kindness, I'm hiking a mile. So I'm hiking a mile on the Appalachian Trail in return for that act of kindness. And the goal is, the Appalachian Trail is 2,180 miles. So that's 2,180 single acts of kindness that could really transform the world in big and small ways. So our hope is that this really takes off, and people, if we get more than 2,180, I'll just keep walking. But our hope is that this really takes off, and people understand that it's not the big things in life that mean the most, it's the small, seemingly insignificant details that mean the most to people.